Welcome to Tell It Like It Is. I'm Gary Polland. Show is a fresh look at politics and public affairs. Here we will give you the real deal, not the bias or spin, or the major media's politically correct or censored opinions they masquerade as facts. When we provide you the opinions, you will know it. This show rejects politically correct uniformity. This disease is a terminal threat for our democracy and for all of our freedoms. It is clear that the 2020 election for president is not finalized. The amount of shenanigans that occurred is unprecedented. Just a few items. Biden got fewer votes than Hillary Clinton and President Obama around the country, except coincidentally the battleground states of Michigan, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, and there's more. In the battleground states, after the ballot counting shut down all at around 1 in the morning on November 4th, the next ballots that showed up the next day were huge tranches of ballots. And coincidentally, they were all for Joe Biden. 25,000 here, 100,000 here. Statistically, this is impossible. Finally, it appears that Wisconsin voted more ballots than they have registered voters. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Our advice is let's make sure who won the majority of electoral votes based on every legal vote and give the president 37 days, like Al Gore got, to contest the 2000 election that he lost to George W. Bush. Is that asking too much of our left-wing media, who's in a rush to anoint Joe Biden as the next president? I don't think so. You may not think these things matters to you, but they do, because this is a threat to our free and democratic elections. We are the target of those who want to destroy America and American life, and that still remains their goal. And now for today's show. Today we are really blessed and honored to have 4 terrific guests, a new record for Tell It Like It Is. First and foremost, we have Judge Eric Andell. He is here because he's the closest in age to Joe Biden. And he is also a star of KSEV's show, The Three Amigos, as is his compadre next to him, conservative commentator Ben Streusand. And then coming to us through the miracle of the internet, we have 2 other guests. First, we have State Senator Paul Bettencourt, who is home recovering from recent surgery and from watching the election, and we're going to get his opinions. And finally, we have former Democratic Judge Maria Jackson, who's with us to give her commentary and add a little grace to the proceedings with all these guys. So welcome to everybody. Thank you. Judge, since you are the senior member here, what happened on Election Day and why did it happen?
First of all, may I say that I'm staggered by the opening that said, no bias here, we'll tell it like it is, whatever. And oh my gosh, the election was stolen. Come on. I mean, you read that, and then you launched into this unfounded fraud claim based upon affidavit. Anyway, what happened on Election Day? On Election Day, I will first say the bad news and the good news. Of course, the great news is President-elect Biden was elected, and he will be. He's going to be the next president of the United States. This show ought to center itself somewhat around that and what that's going to look like, what that will look like, the picture of that. But number 2, I don't think the Democrats did that well. I think it was a poor election for what we had going in. So I'll take the victory. We got a shot at the Senate still. We got a legitimate shot, the 2 senators in Georgia. But we didn't do well state by state. We didn't meet our expectations or my expectations, which shows one thing, that you just can't run an anti-campaign, which we've always known. But no one's had more anti than Trump in this election. I mean, that I know, can remember. I know Hillary, everyone hated Hillary.
The guy didn't get a break from the day he came down the stairs when he was running for president.
Well,
They've been after him.
And no one in this room was for him. What I'm saying, this isn't unusual. He's your candidate. You've grasped the Trumper. Great, but he's not been everyone's friend or whatever. He's half the country's, 49%. They like him, although the editorial, I know my colleagues do not like the Chronicle, but they had a pretty good editorial today about what the Democrats have to look at. This is real. I mean, whatever votes Trump got, those are real voters in real states, and it wasn't just Trump vote that carried the day. He did very well, coattail-wise.
Well, yeah, that's true, but before I get to you, Ben, I just want to add in the Houston Chronicle who spiked one negative story about Joe Biden after another, who accentuated and fanned the flames of the Russian hoax, are now giving advice as to how we should handle elections.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't watch Fox News. Why would I? Why would I? Seriously.
You want maybe for entertainment purposes. I don't know.
I did. I tell you what. I did tell my colleagues, including on the radio, that on Tuesday night I was going to watch Fox, because if they declared a state won, I'm being very serious. Then it's the real deal, and they knocked Arizona immediately.
By the way, is Arizona over, Ben?
That's over.
Well, I don't think the outcome's going to flip, but in terms of giving Donald Trump his day in court, the right to challenge these election results in all of these states, the battleground states, I mean, I think you have to extend to him every option available to him and let it play out and see where it goes. I mean, to say there's no fraud in our elections, like Eric and the media want you to believe, is just as stupid as to say that the election results are all based on fraud. I mean, I think each argument is equally as ludicrous. I do want to make this comment about the Houston Chronicle. I'm just shocked that they would admit that anyone other than racists, bigots, and homophobes voted for Donald Trump, because in their book, those are the only voting characteristics of individuals that could possibly have voted for the president. Well, there were 68 million people that voted for the president. Joe Biden had closer to 70, 71. And if he wins the battleground states, he's the next president. He's the president-elect. I do want to say that at the end of this, between now and December 8th, when the states, the individual delegations meet in the capitals of all the states of the United States, that hopefully all these election challenges will have been heard, and then they will report their findings to the Electoral College. But you have to give the scenario, you have to give everyone a chance to play it out. To say that there's no fraud, well, we know that there are instances of fraud. The real question is there enough fraud to overturn the results of the election?
That's a fair question.
And the media doesn't want to put that. The media and the Democrat media allies couch it in terms of it was totally fair and honest, or it's just completely bogus claims about election fraud, and it's neither of those two.
Or move along. We should move along.
Yeah.
Let's just move along.
Yeah.
Even though they never moved along and haven't since Trump got elected.
Let's see if there's enough to overturn Nevada or Arizona, and we may learn a few things about what happened. There's different degrees of fraud, but there's plenty of illegal actions that occur on Election Day that result in
Well, there is one member of the panel who can actually do something about abuse and fraud in elections. That's State Senator Bettencourt. So, Senator Bettencourt, is there something wrong with how we run elections in Texas in this country?
Well, Gary, first off, both Eric and Ben are right with their analysis. One is Ben's just saying, right, there is fraud. We've had 2 cases of fraud in Texas. Attorney General Paxton just put out 100 indictments against Gray County, another 100 indictments in Limestone County. The question would be, is there fraud that's worth tens of thousands of votes in these other states? However, it was Judge Alito from the U.S. Supreme Court that basically told Pennsylvania to put all those votes on ice. They came in to keep them separate because an elections administrator just decided on their own to change the law and say that we're no longer going to match signatures in Pennsylvania to absentee ballots. Now, I hate to tell everybody this, but the entire voter registration system in the country is on the honor system. We don't have even a citizenship list we can check against, because I'm the last voter registrar to testify for that. Now it's last decade. And the problem is that if you just let these systems go wide open, you perpetuate the myth that there are voter roll integrity problems. And there have clearly been 2 cases in Texas that have documentation over 100 indictments each.
Interesting. So is the legislature going to be doing anything on voter fraud and reducing the opportunity for voter fraud regardless of party?
Oh, I think there's going to be a slew of bills filed, because whenever you have a close election like this, everybody starts looking at all the granular problems that result in election day. Look, what you need is a voter roll with integrity, and you need transparency. And quite frankly, I was part of the group that fought the now departing appointed county clerk in Harris County because he was trying to dump 2 million absentee ballot forms in the mail. That's clearly not prescribed by law. That had to be won at both the Supreme Court level and the federal level. Look, the real point of all this is get counts that people believe in on election day, because Eric's right. The Democrats really didn't have the great day that the pundits planned for them. They actually lost seats in the U.S. House, and it will come down to what happens in the Senate, where I figure in Georgia we're going to see a record $250 million of election money spent. When you look at all this, you've got to have faith that you've got a voter roll with integrity and that you can count what you've got. And in Harris County's case, we've been asking for an explanation of 1,884 vote differential between the Secretary of State, myself, Commissioner Cagle, and even Lieutenant Governor Patrick for weeks, and we still haven't gotten a response from the elections administrator, who now is leaving the day that the county clerk, the appointed clerk, is leaving the day that the canvass is done this week.
Trying to escape the blame. Okay, Judge Jackson, you're Judge Andell's partner in this tag team battle, I guess, today. What is your take on what happened on Election Day and the importance of it going forward for the American people?
Well, I believe that the majority of the voters did speak. And that was a lot of Republicans crossed over, a lot of independents crossed over to elect Joe Biden. Because I believe that what this country needs is for us to not only have fair elections, but presidents who are going to govern and work for everybody, not just because you're a member of a particular party. One of the reasons why I was so successful as a judge is because I was elected as a Democrat, but I was attacked on both sides. If I made a ruling on less than a gram drug case, then I was too liberal on some of the Republicans. If I made a ruling in favor of police officers or in favor of justice and sentenced someone appropriately, it could have been high to certain people, then I was a Republican. So I believe that when people are elected, that they need to be about the business of governing and building coalitions and doing what's right and following the law. So again, I will say that the voters spoke, and Biden is our president-elect.
Yeah, let me ask you a couple of questions that were interesting about the election. Number one, Donald Trump got a record number of African-American votes, especially from African-American males. And Trump also suffered and did not do as well among white suburban women. Do you have an explanation from your perspective of why that happened the way it did?
Well, I mean, the truth is that when President Trump was in office, I did see him do several things for criminal justice. And I know that a lot of African American males appreciated that. And a lot of businessmen, whether they're white, black, or white, were for Trump. A lot of the suburban women were looking at, I mean, you said this is not politically correct. And I've been a judge for a long time and I hadn't been able to speak my opinion. But I mean, how many times did we see Trump tell lies? I mean, it was documented. You would see him say something on one video on the tape, and then he'd come back and say, I didn't say that. Well, I mean, who are you going to believe? Me, my words, or your lying eyes? So I think a lot of parents were thinking, hey, we need to get back to where honesty and integrity matters. And that's my opinion on that.
Okay.
Now, back to election frauds. Yes, I was a victim of election frauds. It happened on the Democrat side. Let's take, for instance, precinct judges that were fired on a Friday before the primary election. regular precinct judges. Let's also take that Diane Troutman before the commissioner's court said, what happened on election day, March 3rd? She said, well, at 12 o'clock, I received notice that a lot of polling locations were closed. Well, this was in precinct 1. So all of a sudden, they were directed to Texas Southern University when a week or just a few days prior, they were talking about how TSU, which is one of the most inconvenient places to vote. I mean, it's great to go vote there for the students, but there's no parking, and it's really inconvenient. But election day, primary election, you see a line wrapped around, people waiting in line till 1:45 a.m. to vote, because a lot of people went to their regular polling places that were open 2 weeks during the primary election. There were little signs posted, oh, go vote at TSU. It was like a secret, like, shh, hey, if you really, really want to go vote, you got to look at the small fine print on the door because we're closed all of a sudden, no notice. So, I mean, now that was voter suppression at its finest on the
cheating.
Democrat side.
And cheating,
so yes,
which- yeah,
election
so-
fraud does happen.
So, Paul,
Yes,
why is that
yes.
stuff still going on in Texas?
Well, first off, Judge Jackson is 100% right. It was voter suppression, what happened in the Democrat primary in Precinct 1, because the county clerk at the time, Troutman, and the Democrat Party closed all the polls around TSU and then told everybody to go into TSU. We had lines that lasted till 1 a.m. in the morning, and we had some television commentators blaming Republicans for voter suppression. Now, it was preposterous because it was Democrats that made that mistake. Look, we're not executing these elections correctly, and her case is a perfect example of it. Now, let me go to one other thing about the national election. Part of Judge Jackson also was right. There was crossover vote both ways. Tremendous numbers. We're going to find out that probably 2/3 of the party's members stayed with their party, and 1/3 they voted a whole bunch of different ways. But what that meant in Texas is that when Biden said he's going to transition the oil industry, that woke everybody up. And in the Valley, which is a big stronghold of the Democratic Party, Trump carried counties that he had lost by 30 points in the last election. And I think what this is going to be a big challenge to Eric's party, Gary, is that started in 2018 because people are going to vote with their jobs. And I'll tell you this, I believe Joe Biden 100% when he looked at the camera and said, we're going to transition the oil industry. Now, when he did that, there was only a few weeks left in the election, and Trump ran the best campaign that he had in the prior year in that time, which means he almost caught up and beat Biden in the Electoral College. But it's made its mark on everybody because we're seeing it in Hispanic voters in the Valley who, as Ben has pointed out, are not racist, et cetera. They're voting for Trump because they're voting for their pocketbooks. They know that the oil industry job they have right now is worth a lot more money than get retrained by some stupid federal government program on Microsoft, and they want to keep their jobs now. And that's going to be the big public policy fight going forward from Texas against the Biden administration. It's real clear, oil industry transition, which means shut it down, or us fighting back to try to hold on to our jobs in Texas.
All right, so Judge, what does that mean to you and your party?
First of all,
Biden originally comes out, says no fracking. He backtracks, obviously, when the polling tells him what a bad position that is.
well, the first thing is the third debate, which was only the second debate, lasted 30 seconds too long.
For Joe Biden.
For Joe Biden. It was just that moment in time when it lasted too long. Yes, it hurt in the Valley, but when the numbers come out and you look at the Hispanic split, it's still going to come out something around 70-30, 65-35. In other words, that's what the numbers are going to be. Notwithstanding in this pocket,
You know, Stark County where
Yeah,
Trump
but
won.
remember, you're talking about 8,000 votes there. I'm talking about our normal split.
It's going to be bigger than that, bigger
No.
than normal. At
65,
least
30.
it's at least 8 points higher nationwide. It's going to be bigger than that in Texas.
The numbers so far, and I've seen some, don't show a seismic shift. I know it seems obvious there must have been in the valley. I'm not even arguing. Remember, I said we had a bad election. I'm not even running from that.
Well, but the more interesting question, for at least for me, is given the way the National Democratic Party, which is basically determined by, New York, Boston, Axis, California, Oregon,
Delaware.
Washington, Delaware is a pimple. It doesn't matter as a state. But that's basically what drives the National Democratic Party and the major media and Hollywood. And that doesn't represent the values of a lot of traditional working class Democrats.
Well, it doesn't, and we know that from the Reagan years,
Right.
which
And
has
it
never
continues.
shifted back. And now you do have very conservative Hispanics. Do you have Gary? You know, because you've been in Republican politics, you know that there's been a loyal 25 to 30% Hispanic base. If part of your reelection strategy, you know that 30-something%. I'm just interested when we dissect all this, how much higher that really turns out to be. But we haven't messaged them correctly. Matter of fact, we haven't messaged the Hispanic community at all. We took for granted that they're going to vote.
Well, kind of like they've treated
Democrat.
the black community, where they use the same tired slogans every election cycle. And the thing that I was going to ask Ben about, and he'll comment, the thing that Trump did is actually campaign in the African American community, in the Hispanic community, and talked about these issues and pointed out rightly, Joe Biden's been in politics 47 years, in power in Washington, and what has he done? Why are we still talking about some of these issues? African American underemployment, African American undereducation. Why are those still issues here when you all were in total power? Your share of the
I
time in the
understand.
last 47 years, Ben.
So the latest numbers I've seen, and they're subject to change and whatever, but it looks like in the exit polling, and again, I think the Trump vote is shy in the exit polling too, but the African American vote, instead of going 8% for Trump, it went 12 or more for Trump. And if you're asking my opinion for an explanation, it's because that there is a burgeoning African American middle class, and their interests are aligned more with Donald Trump and economic issues than they are with people like Oprah Winfrey. And so as a result of that, I think that trend continues, and it's the natural result of all the efforts that have been made in achieving some kind of equality and equal opportunity for everyone to rise to whatever level their merit will take them. And so these successful people, growing middle class of African Americans and Hispanics, are leaving the Democrat Party, not all, slowly creeping, but it's moving that direction. And I think that's a trend that continues. And so I think that's the reason why Trump did so much better with African Americans in 2020 than he did in 2016, than Romney did in 2012. With regard to Hispanic voters, it's very much the same thing, only I think it's a little different in the sense that you have a convergence of issues that Hispanic, I hate this term, non-college educated, because to me it's a pejorative. The media uses that all the time. But let's see, high school grads down in South Texas, truck drivers, pipe fitters, oil industry workers, chemical plants, everything in the industrial sector, those folks have more in common with people that all the Anglos that work in the oil industry and in those same areas of our economy than they do with, Eva Longoria here in Texas. So as a result, they vote their economic interests. I think when the smoke clears, it's at least an 8-point shift. Probably in Texas, it's a 10 to 12-point shift. And basically, it's the roadmap for Republicans to continue to be successful in state elections in Texas in presidential and off-presidential years, because for decades we've been hearing for Democrats, it's just a matter of time. The demographics are going to shift. Sooner or later, the whole state's going to be, majority Hispanic, majority minority. And so all the identity politics that they've been playing for decades, and where if you're an African American, you have to vote Democrat. If you're Hispanic, you have to vote Democrat. Well, guess what? They apparently didn't get the message. And so everybody thinks for themselves. We just got to keep pitching the things that work. Either they can take Eric's advice and change, which I doubt they will, because they never do, because they're stuck with the national model that they've been using ever since Ronald Reagan tore them apart in the 80s.
I've actually heard Judge Andell comment, and I'll let him opine. So I'm going to throw that out, then we have to take a break to pay some bills. But the Judge Andell had said that, I've heard him say before, that moderate Democrats, pro-oil industry, John Sharp type Democrats, Eric Andell type Democrats, can win statewide in Texas in the position we're in today. The problem is the party doesn't nominate him. We end up with MJ Hager. I don't know what her position was on anything, but hold that thought, Judge. You'll get to comment on my recollection of some of your past brilliance,
my
pundency. When we come back after these messages, we'll be back with Tell It Like It Is with our all-star panel reviewing the 2020 election.
Now come test drive the much-anticipated all-new 2021 Cadillac Escalade at Ron Carter Cadillac. And for a limited time, get an unheard-of $19,000 in total savings on new 2020 Escalades, or pay just $879 a month with only $1 down, only at Ron Carter Cadillac. Visit us today, Gulf Freeway, just 2 minutes south of the Beltway. Visit RonCarterCadillac.com, Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer.
I'm Attorney Willie Powles. Allow me to express myself with you. If you've been hurt or injured in a car or truck accident, give me a call and we'll get it fixed today.
Ron Carter Cadillac, Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, delivers test drives to your home or office, like the new 2020 XT4 Luxury Collection, only $299 a month. The new 2020 XT5 Premium Luxury Collection, $399 a month. Or the first ever 2020 XT6 Premium Luxury Collection, just $499 a month. All for 39 months lease with just $1 down. Or purchase and choose 0% APR for 60 months plus $2,000 bonus cash with no payments until March 2021. Visit RonCarterCadillac.com.
Have you been injured in an 18-wheeler accident, truck accident, car accident? Was someone texting and ran into the back of you, not paying attention? It doesn't matter what it is. Give me a call, Attorney Willie Powles. We'll fix it today. The number is 281-881-2457. Again, that number is 281-881-2457. We'll fix it today. Call Attorney Willie Powles.
Welcome back to Tell It Like It Is. We're back with our all-star panel. Judge Maria Jackson, State Senator Paul Bettencourt, commentator Ben Streusand, and the esteemed Judge Eric Andell, who was thinking during the break how to respond to my comment about Texas.
Your point. Well, first of all, no, I could not win a primary race as a moderate. Although I don't know that you get labeled that as quickly as you think. But I know I can't win in Texas now. This last Tuesday showed I don't care what Democrats get thrown into the state race. Right now, if we handicap, and I'm going to switch it to the judge in just a moment, how she would handicap 2 years from now, because now we're in another election cycle completely using this.
Yeah, we had a week off, right?
Oh, that's all you have. That's all you have, because now people are going to start to jockey. Now, if you started to handicap this, who's going to run against any statewide? What Democrat? Whether you're liberal or you're.
Well, Wendy Davis, she'd come back again.
Well, yeah. Look what happened to Wendy. Not only in the governor's race, a couple of years ago, several years ago, but what happened to her in the Valley? I mean, it just didn't work. Maria, what do you think? You think a moderate Democrat can come out of the primary?
I'm in agreement with you, Judge Andell, because right now the way the Democrat Party is going is swinging further and further to the left. And to me, I'm looking at the Republican Party and it's swinging further and further to the right. What happened to, I'm a conservative Democrat, and I know right now, I experienced it, that I wouldn't be able to win a primary. I could probably, well, you're right. I agree with you. Here in Texas, it would be hard.
So which is interesting, Senator Bettencourt, that the Democrats rather be leftist than win, I guess, in Texas.
Well, clearly, the state Democrat Party had a terrible day in Texas on election. And it's even with us counting more and more votes after these elections, we're now actually up to 71 million votes for Trump and 75.7 million for Biden nationally. But when you look at the stats of what actually happened with local district races, that one change in one Senate seat, but none of the predictions that the Democrat Party came through. Now, to Judge Jackson, I say the Democrat, conservatives are welcome in the Republican Party anytime. Because that's really what's happening here. I believe there's a beginning of voting that's going without straight ticket voting. People are going to be looking at issues like oil industry that really affect them, and that's crossing all racial lines. And I think that's a great thing. And that's really one of the reasons why I voted to get rid of straight ticket voting, was I felt like it was important for judges and every other position to have a chance at winning. But the bottom line is that there are major shifts going nationally. We've had now almost 147 million people vote. That's an astonishing number. But the important thing is that I think that there's a great platform for the Republicans in the future. And especially if somehow that the Democrats, take over the U.S. Senate, and then there will be no stopping just a freight train of leftist progressive legislation come out of the House into the Senate and get signed by Biden under pressure from the left of the Democrat Party, because the leftist progressives run the party at the grassroots level, and they'll make their voice heard on primary elections. So bottom line is that we've got a chance to go back as Republicans to principle and public policy. And that's what we need to do, because we can build that coalition, because America, I believe, still wants it. I know the Texan voter is still very much with the Republicans that are pro-business, pro-family, pro-energy industry, and pro-jobs. And that's what we should be pitching. And I'm pretty sure we'll be doing that regularly in the legislative session.
Well, Ben, is there anything left of the polling industry after this election?
Well, they clearly have a lot to answer for, but someone's paying them, and until someone stops paying them, they're going to, keep throwing their predictions, out there for public consumption, rightly or wrongly. I think there's a couple of obvious deficiencies in the polling. I don't pick up my home phone ever. I don't pick up cell phone numbers where I don't recognize the number. And there was a couple of points in the electorate that didn't want to tell people that they were supporting Trump. And that's probably true in the exit polling, just as it was before the election. So a lot of the polling companies tried to create models to adjust for that. They were unsuccessful. Unfortunately, the media and this media Democrat complex, they like to use the polls as a political weapon in order to convince Republicans to stay home or suppress the Republican vote. Wasn't going to happen, but that was the only use for these polls that you can think of, and so they'll continue to have value, because if they're closing near the election, then you know something's going on. If they're widening near the election, something's going on. But, the absolute number is almost irrelevant.
Well, you look at it, and while we can't say that you can say the polling was off, and even the Chronicle admitted that the media has to do a better job of not following those polls because it does weaponize. I mean, they said that in
that's
the
true.
editorial
It does
today. They said
weaponize.
that.
Yeah, but it doesn't prevent them from picking up the weapon and using it.
But
Bunch
let's
of
look at it.
hypocrites.
But first of all, if we didn't have polling, our Three Amigos show on Friday would have go to heck in a handbag. We need that polling we talk about. But anyway, put that aside. The polling, while it was off by the number, was not off by the states. In other words, you can criticize the polling if you want to, but the trend lines in Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Texas is the only one they really blew.
All that showed was that Trump, if he had another 30 days or if he started the campaign
Or if he
differently
debated well the
6
first
weeks
time.
ago instead of 3 weeks ago, he probably would have crossed the line.
Boy,
in
did
some of
you!
those states.
But the polling would have changed. Now look.
No, the result would have changed. The polling would never
Yes,
have
it would have
changed.
changed. Yes, it would have changed. It was closing. You said something that was absolutely correct. Let's
debate.
start blaming Trump on this one. That was a bad campaign. We may criticize Biden for staying in the bunker, although it turned out to be genius. Trump ran really a horrible campaign. And having said that, he still got 70 million
Well,
votes.
as Ben said, the last 3 weeks, Trump ran a good campaign. He had a good second debate. He was very active on the campaign trail. But the first debate,
Horrible.
we all watched it. I was ready to go throw up. It was so awful.
and
And he let Biden off the hook.
Yeah,
Biden
exactly.
never had to say much because Trump kept interrupting him.
It never turned into what Biden is going to do
Your
if
vision.
and when he's elected. It was
Right.
always about defending Trump
Yeah.
and Trump defending himself. And you had to flip that around for Trump to get his max shot at the victory, and he never did it.
And Governor Christie was the one who prepared him for that debate, by the way.
Well, you can't blame anybody but Trump, all right? Because I don't think Trump listens to anybody, and he
that
always
may be
goes
true.
with his own instinct. So,
So,
and it helped him at the beginning, it hurt him at the end.
Judge, do you agree that the first debate was a killer?
Oh my gosh, I felt like Gary. I wanted to go and throw up. It was horrible. It's like, what the heck? When the commentators called it a circus, the circus got offended. They said, excuse us, we're more organized than that.
Yeah, it was.
But no, Trump, he did blow it. Neither one of them did great on that first debate. And I'm just looking forward to us getting back to the business of governing for our country and getting some bills passed that actually make a difference and help all of us.
Yeah, kind of like what you do in the legislature.
And working
Paul.
together with both sides. Yeah, working together with both sides. That's so important.
They don't do that really in Washington, do they, Paul?
No, they don't. And importantly, two things. One, first off, Biden campaigned less than McKinley did when he ran the campaign from his front porch, because that's the last president that ever was elected that never left his house. That McKinley didn't.
Their campaign slogans were the same.
Occasionally leave it. Right. So now I want to also point out that both the 2016 election and the 2020 will go down as some of the closest elections ever. Okay, because in this last election, it's the landslide that will occur from it, because it might be what Eric predicted, which was 306 electoral votes, or what Trump won by last time, or it might be in the 270s or whatever the number is going to come out to be. That's only 92,000 votes. Even right now, with all these late ballots, Democrats running up the numbers that Ben had already talked about, or Gary, you talked about, there's only 92,000 in the four major swing states. Now, what that means is I hope we don't see there's an attack on the Electoral College, because if there is, that will be another progressive leftist attempt to rewrite the Constitution, because they put that in to prevent large states from running up the numbers, like the People's Republic of California. And then somehow, because the Californians decide that Biden, because of Hollywood, whatever is the right deal, then we all have to take Biden in the future. I can't wait to see that debate get started, because if they do, that will be a mistake on the Democrats' party side, just like packing the Supreme Court will be a mistake. But I think we're going to see some, sharp differences on energy policy right away from the Biden administration, and that's going to affect what's happening here in Texas, much less Oklahoma and Pennsylvania. So bottom line is, the American democracy works when you have a voter roll with integrity, and you've got election procedures that are followed, and then the people believe in the vote count. And if we need to spend, as President Bush said, even though he congratulated Biden in his statement, he said, look, if we need to spend X number of weeks running through all the legal challenges, we should do it, because you have to have that as a bedrock of U.S. democracy going forward.
Right, and what's interesting about this election also, did y'all look at what happened in California? You had critical propositions, one of which was to basically reverse Prop 13 for business property, and the other was to repeal the ban on affirmative action in California. The People's Republic of California, Paul just described, decided and voted the conservative way on both. Any explanation?
And Illinois, I might add, in the rejection of the progressive income tax.
In Illinois,
Yeah.
Another big one, right. And these are states the Republicans haven't won forever, that are dominated by the Democrats. So what's given?
I don't know, but they all voted for pot.
Yeah, everybody voted for pot. Everybody voted for pot.
What
I
do
don't
you
think it's a partisan issue.
I'm going to posit this now, and we'll catch our show, The Three Amigos. But
Yeah, you can promote it. It's
I'm
fine.
going to posit this right now. What makes you think Trump isn't running for 2024 with all this stuff?
It is
Is
certainly possible that if he is not successful, he'll run for 24. I also think it's possible he's going to set up a media empire to fight Fox News for the conservatives.
It's
which
also
may be a good
possible
idea.
he may, you'll love this, create a new political party.
Well, that's possible too, because he was a Democrat forever, then he became a Republican.
I'm okay with that because I'm okay
Yeah,
with him
I'm
being
sure
an
you would be.
independent because he wouldn't take votes from the Democrats.
Oh yeah, he did.
Yeah, he
No, not as an independent party
Oh,
running where
he
he'd have
did.
to run.
It's interesting. The two elections, if you flip them, are almost the mirror
Well, they're
image.
mirrors.
Yeah,
Except
small number of votes
Arizona.
separating the two.
Except Arizona and Georgia, which is interesting. We're not talking about that enough. Texas.
All right, Georgia.
Well, Georgia's
Do they
closer than
cheat
it should
there
have
too?
ever.
We'll see who wins.
But here's the thing, and I know Judge Jackson's probably we'll look at the numbers, but I think, if I saw a reporter correctly, that the African-American vote, for the first time ever, equaled the Anglo vote. That is the numbers.
In Georgia?
The numbers, period, nationwide. Now, if that's true, that's a new trend line that will have to be, you'd have to pay attention to that.
The demographics went from 65% to 53% Anglo versus African American over the last decade or two. So it's definitely narrowed. But again, Republicans should never cede the ground on identity
Never.
politics.
No, not at all.
Because I do think there's this burgeoning middle class of African American voters
Which Trump
that lives in the
worked on
suburbs
to
that
give
Trump
them
needs to,
economic
and the
opportunity,
Republican
yeah.
Party needs to chase.
And that's why you've got to watch that Georgia election, because that's going to be an interesting. Runoffs always have a diluted voter turnout.
Okay, so your take.
So I don't know the answer. I don't perceive the Democrats winning that.
My take is if the Republicans run on the right issues, they win. One of the issues that we didn't run on, interesting, that's been a very successful issue, especially in minority communities, is school choice. Republicans win Florida because of the substantial number of African American votes who went to DeSantis because he was pro-choice in education and his opponent was not.
And how do you think the socialism thing worked in South Florida with the Cubans and the South Americans?
I
Been
don't think
there,
so.
done that.
And not just that, but there were sections of Florida with high percentages of Puerto Ricans that had fled the island and they refused to vote Democrat because they had seen the results of Democrat control over Puerto Rico for the last decade.
Right.
Decades.
So they actually should put those people on TV.
So what do they think about Georgia?
Senator Bettencourt, Georgia. What's going to happen in those 2 Senate races? Obviously, both sides will have plenty of money. That won't be the issue.
It's going to be a Donnybrook of biblical proportions. I think $250 million is going to be spent there. Republicans only have to win 1 seat. I think Mr. Perdue nearly won it outright. He was at 49%. The question is whether Ms. Kelly can also win. Like Karl Rove and a bunch of people, I've already sent money to both of them, and I think that it's a microcosm of in this case, you want divided government to have a check on leftist progressive. So I think the Republicans have the edge going in, even though it's a battleground state. Of the 4 swing states, this is there's only 11,000 votes right now between Trump and Biden in Georgia, even less than Arizona. But Eric's right about Arizona. We predicted a week out on the Amigos, which anybody can watch 700 a.m. from 4 to 6 on Friday. In fact, I think, Eric, if you take time off, we're going to ask Judge Jackson to sit in for you, because Gary calls in and sits in with us too.
Good.
But
I think I may come in this Friday.
Right. but the fact of the matter is, this is going to be for the control of the U.S. Senate. And fortunately, we've got one very strong candidate and another one coming up fast. But it's going to be a fight that will be the most expensive in history.
Fascinating. Judge Jackson, what's going to happen in Georgia?
That one, I don't even want to predict. I like Ossoff. I like him because he's intelligent. My fear is that if he goes to the Senate, will he go too far to the left? I haven't studied his views enough to actually be a huge proponent. I think he's very intelligent. I did see the debate. And on the other hand, I am a huge fan of checks and balances.
Yeah,
so
and
just what Senator Bettencourt just said, yes. It's about checks and balances.
I keep trying to convince him that he should want the Republicans to control the Senate because we would be the boogeyman for Biden.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he's going to have that liberal socialist agenda steamrolled down his throat, and he's going to be defending it 4 years from now. So the best thing for you guys is to have the Republicans to blame for stopping your agenda. Your more ridiculous.
So I will say, if you look back at I don't know where Joe Biden's at today mentally and where he feels. But if you go back 15 or 20 years ago when he was in the U.S. Senate, he did make deals with Republicans. I mean, there were comments. My friends who have been around for a long time said the old Joe Biden, you could work with him. He believed in give and take. That's the reason that Barack Obama would not deal with Congress, because he hated him. He would send Biden to go because Biden was a deal maker and could make deals that Barack Obama couldn't. So if Biden decides to do that, he has the opportunity to follow the example, assuming Republicans hold the Senate, which I think they will, of Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich.
Okay, let's assume
second term.
Let's assume that I can spell disingenuous. Let me just assume that I can spell disingenuous. He's all for me. This is for the Democratic Party. I'm only talking about the good of the Democratic Party and Joe Biden. All of a sudden, he's a big Joe Biden guy, and he hopes that the Senate stays Republican. Then, if we split Georgia and give Biden some leverage with regard to Romney, Collins, Murkowski, where you have an opportunity to go negotiate. You have an opportunity
because
to talk some sense into them.
Because McConnell doesn't have to put the stuff on the floor for a vote if he doesn't want to.
You got to have to deal with Mitch. But interesting, you're talking about the Loeffler race and her opponent, I forgot his name. He's a pastor, but one of the things I've read about him is that he has a good relationship with Jeremiah Wright. You remember him? The blazing anti-Semite, anti-white, GD America preacher from Chicago. I don't think that's going to play real well in this runoff.
I think, and Paul, see if you agree with me on this, but there are three or four really big fault lines that the Democrats, if they cross, they're going to have some big blowback. It's going to cause them severe issues. One of them is don't mess with the Supreme Court. Don't mess with statehood for D.C. and Puerto Rico. Don't mess with the filibuster. And there might be a fourth one. I was thinking about it earlier, but those are kind of the big things that a Republican Senate would prevent from occurring. And don't mess with the Electoral College. Now, you mess with those four things, and you get into this off-limit territory that I think helps us and hurts them. And so a Republican Senate would prevent sort of these worst impulses from occurring and save you guys. We would save you from yourself.
How much? Go ahead. How much worse can we be? We don't have the Senate. I mean, we almost lost the House. So what if we did all of that? What's our downside? Where are we going
in a
with
strange
this?
way, guys, and Adam Judge, Biden actually didn't have coattails. Trump actually had coattails, but he lost anyway, because of the numbers in the House that went up and the fact that the Senate is probably going to stay within just one seat. Now, when you look at that, what it means is that you do have a check on public policy, but what's going to come out of the House is, well, right now the deputy campaign secretary said Biden is going to honor his commitments to the leftist progressives. Well, that means the Green New Deal. That means oil industry regulations. It means job-killing stuff coming out of the House like a freight train. And Mitch McConnell is going to sit on that. And Ben's right; he won't allow a vote on it. But you do have an opportunity in a split government to make a deal if everybody can think about it. We do it in the Texas House. The Texas Senate all the time. Because in the last session, we really only had a few dozen votes that were all partisan. And then there was also the thousands plus that were, basically, bipartisan. And you have to look at each individual case one by one and be willing to sit down. And we still eat in one lunchroom in Austin. Okay. It makes interesting conversation, trust me, but I think it's a lot of fun. I think the Texas Senate model is the way to go. And we'll see what happens. If the federal Senate is going to stay totally polarized, because if it's going to be a fight between progressive leftist legislation that Mitch McConnell and the Republicans stop, I think Republicans win big.
What do you say?
Well, what do I think?
Yeah.
Let the judge go.
Well, I mean, this is all.
I want to say
self-serving.
something.
Anything I say is self-serving. This is self-serving.
All right, well, let Judge Jackson be self-serving.
I want the other judge.
We'll hear from the other judge.
Well, that judge. I'm sorry, Judge. Go. You take it from here. I don't want it.
Let me just say that I'm hoping and praying that President-elect Biden uses his skills that he had so eloquently he used in the Senate, and he reaches across the aisles to get things done. I have been very frustrated with Mitch McConnell. I've watched him set different standards when it benefits him. And that's
Harry
troublesome.
Reid model.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, okay. I have been so disappointed with Mitch McConnell applying different standards, and this way, we're going to do it this way because we want to do it this way. But, I changed my mind because this is going to actually benefit me and my party. Again, I go back to fairness, honesty, and integrity. The same set of rules should be applied to everyone. The same set of standards should be applied across the board.
Yeah, Eric, when are y'all going to start doing that?
Judge Jackson, you don't want any part of that Amigo show. I don't know why. I mean, you see what I have to put up with every Friday.
Yeah, but they'll be nicer if she's a woman.
Oh my gosh.
You're sandwiched in You're sandwiched in.
Well, I
Judge Andell.
will say, as we move close to wrap up, this show and the guests show that what's possible in America in terms of with politics. You can't have sane civil discussions between partisans who differ, but they don't holler at each other. They don't cross talk. They don't close their ears and not listen. And I think the lesson, I believe, and I've talked to y'all about this before, that's important that we all learn is that whatever we know and whatever our political position is in our party and our political philosophy doesn't mean that we have an exclusive monopoly on wisdom. There are good ideas that come across. Judge Andell has had good political ideas sometime in his life.
Sometimes.
No, more than that.
No, sometimes.
Ben Streusand has, Senator Bettencourt, Judge Jackson, good ideas. And you all know that you've heard good ideas from the other side, but if you don't listen, you never hear what they say. And the biggest problem we have, not in the Texas Senate, Paul, but in Washington is neither side listens to each other. They talk over each other. They talk around each other. They don't hear what they're saying. And that's a big problem for the country. At least that's my
I think
take.
the media, well, Gary, I think the media is very complicit in
Absolutely.
basically bringing froth to the point of boiling nationally on issues just constantly. And really, it's not so much issues anymore. It's just pure personality politics.
You're right. And time is up, Paul. But you have a good personality, and Judge Jackson has a good personality, and Ben Streusand and Judge Andell have a good personality. I want to thank you all for coming. It was a little experiment with the show, and I think it worked really good. So my parting message this week to our viewers is this. American democracy is still working. Stay active, stay interested, and understand that it's critical for the future of this country that you seek out the truth. Don't trust the mainstream media because they're just political hacks. And I'll see you next week.